Hi, I'm Jake Schmidt. I'm the International Climate Policy Director at the Natural Resource Defense Council. Today's Tuesday. It's a morning. It's the second day of the global warming negotiations here in Mexico. This is the first of what hopes to be a series of video blogs where I'll try to give you some sense of the progress over these 2 weeks of negotiations, where some of the differences lie, where we're finding some common ground, and where the ultimate outcome might end up over this 2 weeks. So I'll try to give you some of my sense of that meeting. After the first day, the mood is relatively good, but obviously the expectations are very different than they were just 1 year ago in Copenhagen, and that's kind of a sub-story at the beginning of the meeting, how things have shifted in the sense of expectations and the reality of this meeting. So going into Copenhagen, the expectations were very high that we would ultimately find a solution to this issue, and we'd come to some kind of new international agreement. There was the prospect of heads of government coming and helping to resolve some of those differences, and ultimately we had 120 heads of government come and the final week of the meeting and sit down and negotiate some of the details of this agreement, which is very rare in these global warming negotiations. We don't have that level of heads of government engagement. We had a huge public attention going into Copenhagen, and things have changed quite a bit. The expectations for this meeting are different. Nobody expects that we will finalize the ultimate agreement here. We don't expect major heads of government to come here to help to resolve some of these differences. But importantly, this meeting needs to make progress. And I think that there is some key progress that can be made over these 2 weeks that will continue to move the world forward on dealing with this difficult challenge. So what we expect coming out of this meeting is a series of agreements to begin to move forward on reducing emissions in key countries around the world, increasing the transparency of their actions, increasing the amount of money and the set of tools that we have to deal with deforestation, mobilizing greater resources and political will to deploy clean energy in key developing countries around the world, and dealing with the impacts of global warming in the most vulnerable countries. On each of those fronts, I'm optimistic that we can make progress. I think that there's solutions within sight between the differences of current countries' positions, and I think there's a path forward. And I think that's the kind of mood that you heard from the negotiators yesterday in their press conferences and their interventions, was a sense of optimism that countries can come forward with workable solutions to deal with what sometimes are differences of opinion on how to deal with these issues. And I think that that's important mood to begin this meeting, because we need countries coming in with a sense of can-do spirit. Let's find a path forward. Let's find solutions. Let's not put up roadblocks to making progress on this critical issue. So I think that that's important. I think in some sense, the real sub-story of this meeting is the kinds of progress that we've seen over the last couple of years in terms of what countries are doing. And I think that that's what gives me a sense of optimism, which is difficult in these global warming negotiations, but that's what gives me a sense of optimism. So when I began this process many years ago, there was a large debate around whether or not key developing countries would further take steps to reduce their emissions, and whether developed countries would deepen their commitments to reduce their emissions. And that was the major divide. I think since then we've seen a huge shift. We now have 80 countries that account for 80% of the world's global warming pollution who have signaled that they are going to take specific steps to reduce their global warming pollution. And I think that they have begun to make progress at home in implementing their actions. So we're seeing countries turning their pledges into changes in policies, laws, programs on the ground in their countries, and ultimately that is what this international agreement is trying to deliver. While the words and the paragraphs and the commas matter in creating the frameworks for that change, ultimately it comes down to, do countries take action at home? Do they change their policies? Do they create incentives for wind, solar, energy efficiency, low carbon technologies and so forth. And so I think that that's the key sort of piece going forward. So that's what we'll be looking to, is whether or not we can see the kind of progress that countries continue to say that they're going to move forward at home, and whether or not they'll continue to take the steps here in these international negotiations to deal with this issue. So stay tuned. I'll be covering these more from later blogs. Thanks.